All right, welcome everybody to another Friday Technique video. I'm JL Holdsworth. We're here at our auxiliary room with Spot Athletics with Zach Gallmann. Today we're going to talk about overhead pressing. Zach is a much better overhead presser than I am. His best overhead press is 420. I'm great at the bench press, but tight lats and limited range of motion in the shoulders does not make for good overhead pressing. So that's one of the issues you'll have to address if you want to get good at overhead pressing. So the first thing we're going to talk about is our setup in the overhead pressing. Obviously you can do, log, axle, bar, and you can clean and then overhead press. And one of the things you'll find as you do more overhead pressing is that when you actually clean the weight up, regardless of your implement, you'll feel better and tighter than unracking the bar. The reason for this is that your lats and your whole body get attention to it when you clean it, that when you unrack the bar, you have to really consciously create that tension or you're gonna have problems overhead pressing out of a rack. Today we're gonna talk about overhead pressing just out of the rack because whether you're cleaning it up or not, that's a whole nother technique. So we're just gonna focus right on the overhead press. So first thing we wanna look at when Zach gets set up here is that we wanna create a big shelf with our chest. So as he creates this shelf, that gives the bar a place to rest, and also his elbows will be underneath the bar. So very important when you're unracking the bar to be in this position with the big chest, lats nice and tight, elbows underneath the bar. Some of the things we see from younger athletes or inexperienced lifters is trying to come back and unrack the bar from here and just crank it out. Same thing when they're putting it away, they try to do this. It's not really smart with 300 pounds, but hopefully if you're lifting 300 pounds, you're not an inexperienced lifter or you're a freak. So, Zach's gonna create that big chest, get the elbows under the bar, lats tight, stand up with it, back up. As you can see in this position here, elbows are nice underneath the bar, or the bar is slightly behind the elbows. One of the things I see in overhead pressing, a lot of people who have done like some Olympic lifting or other things, we have this, is very inexperienced. If Zach goes to press from this externally rotated position, that's a great way to tear a rotator cuff. The other one is the elbows too far forward, which Zach has a hard time doing, I can't do it. But when the elbows get too far forward, now you're creating an extension and putting a ton of torque on the wrist, a lot more than you want. So you'll find an optimal position where the bar has a nice shelf to sit on, the lats and the elbows are right under the bar. So as Zach stands here, everything's in alignment and good to go. One of the things I want to talk about is one of my biggest pet peeves in the overhead press, and that is people not doing an overhead press and calling the exercise an overhead press. We see this a lot in people who have limited range of motion or just trying to get a lot more weight than they can really overhead press. What they're doing is something called a bent press, which used to be a lift that actually people did in the Olympics and in major weightlifting competitions. The bent press, go ahead, is when you lean back and you press the bar here. This is not an overhead press. That is an overhead press. The premise is the bar is overhead Zach's head, hence overhead press. In the bent press, it's more like an inclined bench type position. And a lot of people finish here and say, look at my overhead press. Guys, it bothers me so bad. That's like doing a decline press, and obviously most people can decline press more, it's a shorter range of motion. People going, oh, my bench press is 500. But then they show you the video and it's a decline press. It's two different exercises. So if you're doing a bent press, I don't care. Just say, I did a bent press. Don't say you did overhead press, because the bar's not over your head, it's not an overhead press. It takes far more lat mobility, shoulder mobility, flexibility in the lats, mobility in the shoulders to do an overhead press than it does a bent press. Okay? So please stop. That's a big pet peeve of mine. Now, when we're looking at this, some of the other things that's very important with this exercise is how we lower the bar in the overhead press. So Zach brings it up, his head goes through. That's very important when we're bringing the bar up. You'll hear like some of the cues we use, big lats and head through. Because as the bar travels past the face, you have to get the head through to create that good position where the bar is in the center of Zach's body. When we're coaching this and we're looking at this, ideally these arms will be just behind his ears. Now we don't want them way behind. Go ahead, just move it back. Now we don't want it like this, because if there was 400 pounds in there, you see the line of force is through not in a good safe position. So go ahead and go back. This, now the bar right behind Zach's ear is right in the line with his body. Now when we lower the bar, go ahead and lower too far. So when we lower the bar, some people come down and end up in this position, very dangerous, especially with heavy weights. Go ahead and bring it back up. When we lower the bar, we want to return the bar in the same way. And if you watch the bar path as Zach lowers the bar, go ahead. It's almost a straight up and down, slight arc back, just like we do in our bench press. Go ahead, go back up. Gets his head out of the way, boom, pushes the head back through. Good, right? The overhead press, I believe, and I've changed my philosophy on this, I think it's a better overall strength builder than the bench press. If I was to redesign the NFL Combine, I would do overhead pressing instead of bench pressing, because from your feet to your fingertips, you have to be able to create, generate, and stabilize force. I think, I have a hard time with the overhead press. I didn't do a lot of it growing up, so I have really tight lats. It's very hard for me to overhead press. At this point though, I really truly believe for your athletes, it's a much better overall strength builder. And everybody talks about, stupid core, but it's so dumb. But trunk stability, when you're holding 400 pounds over your head, if this isn't stable, it's not gonna happen. So get out there, start overhead pressing. I think it's one of the best exercises for overall strength building. And really, up until the 70s, the overhead press was how men tested their strength. The bench press was not the tester of strength. And I think that really things are coming back to that because it does show better overall strength than the bench press. So thank you. If you guys have any more questions, thespottathletics.com or our Facebook page, Spot Athletics. We also have our Twitter feed where we send out a lot of great tips. Keep the suggestions coming in and have a great weekend.